Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a title that needs no introduction, even though I am in the process of doing so. The Heroes in a Half show went from a black and white indie comic in the 80s to one of the largest franchises that have been going strong well into the present. Toys, comics, TV shows, movies, and of course, what we're here to talk about, video games.
To say that TMNT was everywhere growing up would be an understatement. TV shows, games, toys, breakfast cereal, clothing, school supplies, vitamins, that table hockey game, movies, a musical tour, board games, coloring books, home pregnancy tests, pasta, just everywhere.
Wait, I'm pretty sure they didn't have home.
No, everywhere.
As we come to the end of one era of TMNT with the rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we also mark the celebration of the classic Konami stable of turtle adventures with the Cowabunga collection. I think it's time for these two 90s kids to jump right back into the sewer, fight the Foot Clan, and something Manhattan Project as we look at what we feel are the top 10 TMNT games. Take a drink every time we say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or TMNT. You'll be drunk by the end of the video.
This is a list we've wanted to make for a long time. That said, we also wanted to take the time to play every TMNT entry possible, if only to acknowledge that there were good Ninja Turtles games to come out after 1994.
As we have made top 10 lists before, we're going to set some ground rules so we don't miss a game that you like, even though I bet we will, and I am not digging out my LCD Turtles games because they are hours away from here and most likely burned to cinders, as my father likes to burn things that are no longer needed. Mobile games can get 100% and web browser games are right there with them.
Well, yeah, we have to have some kind of limit here. Some of those mobile games came out on flip phones.
We'll mainly focus on console, arcade, and handheld games, and most likely we'll have some lovely rose-tinted glasses on as we turtle wax nostalgic on our childhoods. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Tim. We're Haruokay, and these are our top 10 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games. Number 10. TMNT, Game Boy Advance. Now here's one I completely missed back in the day. While the home console ports of the TMNT movie game were essentially Prince of Persia clones without the rewind feature, TMNT on the GBA sticks to their tried and true beat-em-up formula, and then mixes it with River City Ransom. And if you know anything about us over here, we love ourselves some River City Ransom.
Choke on my like you owe me money!
This game was actually made by a lot of the same team that would go on to make the infamous Scott Pilgrim beat-em-up. You can even see a lot of that game in here with things like character sprites, moves, and the upgrade system. It even has a shop element which, much like River City Ransom, has you grabbing coins from fallen enemies to purchase things like stat boosts, extra lives, and health. Mind you, there were elements I wasn't so crazy about. The upgrades and experience only being accessible once you beat a level is a far cry from what River City Ransom and the team's later games would offer, which is leveling up and purchasing upgrades mid-stage mostly. And the gameplay can get a little repetitive, especially early on. Also, all four turtles seem to share experience, which, okay, sure, we're here for a good time, not a long time, but it's definitely a game that rewards you the more you play it. It's a game made for playing in short bursts on the go, but you can still have lots of fun at home with this one. But as an overall package, I'd say this is still one of the better TMNT games on offer, if you can find yourself a copy that doesn't necessitate a robbery. Number 9. The Hyperstone Heist. How do I put my feelings on Hyperstone Heist into words? Playing Turtles in Time is like rolling a natural 20. Playing Hyperstone Heist is like rolling a 16. I'm of two minds on the Hyperstone Heist. On one hand, it's essentially a remix of Turtles in Time, a bone being thrown to Genesis users for not getting a true blue Turtles in Time. But on the other hand, it's still one of the best beat-em-ups on the Genesis, and that's no small thing.
One thing I'm going to say about the Hyperstone Heist is the sound quality that you get is fantastic, but that could be just the Sega kid living inside me. It gives you that lovely Sega sound charm that you're only going to find on the Sega Genesis. Plus, while it is, in a sense, a Turtles in Time port, it actually remixes a few stages from the first arcade game, the Manhattan Project. Hell, you even get Shredder's Hideout, which gives me a bit of that Ninja Mansion level from TMNT 2 on the NES, but for the most part, it seems to be the only original stage that's not using Turtles in Time assets.
Hyperstone Heist has a few changes that make it stand out a little from Turtles in Time. It features a run button, which is something the SNES or arcade versions can't say. It's also one of the only TMNT games to ever feature Tatsu as a boss. It also gives us Rocksteady twice and no Bebop, which was always baffling to me as a kid. Still kind of baffling to me now.
While I do enjoy the boss rush, it seems to be mostly padding. I assume this is just memory limitations on the system, or they just wanted to push this out as fast as they could to appease Sega owners, but that is wild speculation on my part.
Outside of that though, this really is a remix of Turtles in Time. But given how strong the game it's taking from is, that's more than enough.
Number 8. Radical Rescue. Game Boy. I never played Radical Rescue. I was not a big fan of its veiny, gross box art, so I just kind of walked right on by the game. Didn't think it would be a worthwhile experience. Little Kevin, how dumb you were. Radical Rescue, as the name describes, puts you in control of Mikey right from the get-go. The other turtles, Splinter and April, are all captured, and it's up to everyone's favorite stoner to put down his bong and save his family. As you navigate through Shredder's mine, base, sex dungeon, whatever, you fight an interesting collection of the Playmates figure roster to get keys, to save your brothers, and eventually get your hands on Shredder, who is a cyborg or something. It's Ninja Turtles. Roll with it. Here's the thing. Each turtle has a different ability. Mikey is able to glide, Donnie can climb, Leo can drill and destroy certain blocks underneath them, and Raph can go into his shell or something. I'm sure they can all do this, and I'm not sure why just Raph does it. Anyway, it allows for sneaking, and in some areas allows for the dodging and getting around of hazards. You'll need to pause in order to select another turtle. The select button does bring up a lovely little map that shows you where everything is, and all items are designated by a dot, as are people you need to save. Everything's a dot. Move towards the dots. It's a turtle Metroidvania, essentially. Outside of the stale boss selection and lack of any other big-name TMNT villain or character, like, where the is Krang? It's actually a really solid game. Could have used a battery save, but passwords are reasonable. It is, however, quite expensive nowadays, going for as much as $1,000 complete in a box? Jesus Christ. Number 7.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Rescue Palooza. Now, we originally didn't think that we'd be putting a fan game on this list, but my god, have you played Rescue Palooza? Developed by Merso X and made using an open source beat-em-up engine called OpenBOR, Rescue Palooza is a giant love letter to both TMNT games of old, as well as the original cartoon series from the 80s and 90s. Not content with just giving you 4 turtles, Rescue Palooza throws a near overwhelming number of playable characters your way. Every stage beaten gets you between 3 to 5 new characters to select, each with their own stats, sprites, and moveset. It's actually impressive just how many characters they managed to get in here. We even get Mondo Gecko and Ace Duck. Ace Duck. The story is very reminiscent of Bucky OHare on the NES. All of your friends have been kidnapped, and it's up to you to save them. You'll do so by selecting each level via an overworld map taken straight out of the first Ninja Turtles game. Nearly every stage here is taken from a previous TMNT game, with a few extra surprises thrown in that will definitely please longtime fans. It even gives you access to Foot Clan vehicles previously unplayable. Just tell me riding a giant mouser that shoots lasers out of its mouth doesn't look like a good time. The only downside I can think of might be how some characters aren't really the best choices for certain stages. Add in a story that doesn't take too long to tell, a great sense of humor, plus an obvious love of all things TMNT, and you've got a Ninja Turtles game that absolutely deserves your time and attention. Number 6. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. 1993 and 1994 were a time when everybody was trying to get some of that Street Fighter II money. Sometimes it was Mortal Kombat money, but most of the time, Street Fighter 2. That game was seriously everywhere, to the point where it was starting to bleed into other franchises. And man, did it bleed all over TMNT. TMNT Tournament Fighters was released on 3 separate consoles with 3 very distinct ports. The NES, SNES, and Genesis all had their own Tournament Fighters game. Each had their own roster, movesets, sprite designs, features, and even their own box art variants. If we had to pick one of these 3 official games, it would most definitely be the SNES port. Not only did it have the best feeling combat, but it also had the most game modes. On top of that, it also had the largest roster, giving it greater replayability than either the NES or the Genesis versions.
Let's quickly talk about the NES version of Tournament Fighters, because me, is it an exercise in frustration. First of all, good things. Does control well for a fighter with 2-button input. It feels good. Special moves come out when they need to, and if you're playing with another poor unfortunate soul trapped to play this game with you, it's fun. Single player, however, can just suck all of my. The CPU can just predict anything you throw at it. Every friggin' character has SNK boss syndrome. Oh, and Shredder and his stupid multi-punch garbage. I hope, Tim, that this footage was warranted, you miserable little piece of... You can't do this to me.
I'm gonna miss that guy. Of course, if we're counting non-official titles, we absolutely have to give some love to the fan-made TMNT Cross Justice League Turbo. The game started as a fan project upgrade of the SNES version, but soon morphed to include characters and sprites from Justice League Task Force. While not official, its gameplay and amount of content dwarfs all of the original home releases combined. More characters, tag battles, extra training, challenge modes, online play. This one has it all. The game even has a passionate online community that are still holding tournaments to this day. Hell, this game even made an appearance in Combo Breaker recently. It's not the only game that lets you pit Michelangelo against Batman, but it's the best TMNT focus game that does.
Number 5. TMNT, the arcade game.
I originally wanted to put the NES and arcade titles as separate entries on this list, but going back to them, it's harder to separate the two than I remember. That probably has something to do with how closely tied they are to one another. I mean, it's right there in the name. The original game completely wowed Ninja Turtles fans when it first dropped in arcades. So much so that most people's biggest complaint about the original NES release is that it wasn't the arcade game.
Man, if you were alive when that arcade game first came out, walking into the arcade, and you hear all the different sights and sounds, the flashing lights, that terrifying Aliens game, a track loop, and then you hear it. That theme that always brings a smile to your face, and it gets your heart racing, and then you see that big, beautiful 4-player behemoth. Man, what a time to be alive. Talk about a game with so much hype behind its name.
Flash forward a few years, and Ultra Games, Konami's then shell company, released an arcade port as a sequel to the platformer. They were so insistent that we knew we were getting a home port that they literally named it the arcade game. The arcade certainly had its advantages, such as better graphics and 4-player co-op, but the NES made up for this by giving us 2 additional stages and bosses for the home release. Also a Pizza Hut coupon, which was amazing, if you lived in a town that had a Pizza Hut. Which we did not. While it's always been a dream of mine to see an NES mod of this with 4-player support, it more than fulfills the requisite 2-player experience. Great presentation, simple but fun combat, and a memorable soundtrack make either version of this game a must-play for Ninja Turtles fans. Number 4. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Mutant Nightmare. Not being a fan of the first few video game entries of the 2003 TMNT, I admittedly slept on Mutant Nightmare back in the day. But when I came around to finally giving it a shot for this list, I just couldn't put it down. Clearly taking notes about what worked and what didn't from the first 2 titles, Mutant Nightmare gives us an overhead action RPG loaded with an upgrade system, cutscenes, and a ton of missions and content. To mix things up, there are small shooter stages, free roam stages for fighting and grinding, hidden bonuses that are actually worth picking up, and 4-player action featuring AI companions that are actually useful. There aren't many co-op games where I feel like the CPU is making a real difference, but this game is a rare exception. The game is so rich in content that it actually came packed in 2 discs back in the day. I tend to judge how much I love a game by how much I want to keep playing it, and Mutant Nightmare is one of the few TMNT games to have an absolute hold on me. And again, I can only imagine how sick this game would have been with 4-player co-op. Turtle power.
Number 3. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, The Manhattan Project.
The Manhattan Project had some pretty big shoes to fill when it originally came out on the NES. It was a sequel to one of the most beloved beat-em-ups on the NES and in the arcade. In a way, the game needed to somehow live up to, and ideally top, both of those games. And we think it actually pulled it off.
Comparing this to its older, the arcade game brother, it does add a lot of quality of life updates to the beat-em-up formula. After losing a life in the game, you have the option to switch out your turtle of choice, no longer stuck playing as the same character through a whole playthrough. You also get a neat little throw mechanic that allows you to easily take care of large groups of enemies by just throwing them over your head. In terms of game speed, it feels faster, and overall, it's just a better product than what we got with TMNT 2, the arcade game.
Coming out later into the console's lifecycle, the Manhattan Project had the advantage of being able to utilize later enhancements made in NES game development. A better engine, better graphics, and a soundtrack that more than earns its spot among the best of Ninja Turtle games. It also introduces the Turbo Turtle moves into the franchise that deliver a devastating attack at the cost of some of your health. This helped give each Ninja Turtle a little more uniqueness in terms of playability, something that the last NES game admittedly lacked. It's one of the most challenging TMNT games to be sure, but it's also one of the most fun.
Number 2. Turtles in Time.
You knew this one had to be somewhere near the top, and why wouldn't you? Anyone who loves the Ninja Turtles and has played Turtles in Time will tell you it's one of the best Ninja Turtles games ever made. Hell, most beat-em-up enthusiasts will tell you it's one of the best beat-em-ups ever made. Even more, many SNES fans will tell you it's one of the best Super Nintendo games ever made. It's just that good.
This was my first Super Nintendo game. I cannot tell you how much I love this game. While I did like any means of 4-player interaction, you still get that feel with everyone passing around 2 controllers just for a chance to play it. It is extremely rare that a game port surpasses the original in such a way that Turtles in Time has done.
With plenty of stage variety, tight combat, and an unforgettable soundtrack, Turtles in Time was one of the best Ninja Turtles products on offer. Hell, despite being a launch title for the SNES, few, if any, beat-em-ups released on the console past it were able to top it. Even Pizza Power, the opening song from the arcade version, was a bright mark on the otherwise horrendous TMNT musical tour. Yes, this game even made the music tour better. It's just that good.
I don't know, Tim. You Can Count on Us was a pretty powerful track too. Don't hate.
Those who have played it know, and those who haven't are just one playthrough away from adding it to their favorite beat-em-ups list. This game is most definitely for fans of the franchise, but I've never met a single human soul who didn't have fun playing Turtles in Time. And finally,
Bucky OHare.
that's right, Bucky wait, what the
Hear me out here. There is no other place outside of a Let's Talk About where I can put this, so you just got a deal, Tim.
Okay, but
Konami not only had a dope little NES title, but they had a sick arcade game of Bucky. Toys for the series were made by Playmates. Hell, TMNT toys fit on the Bucky OHare toys, so it belongs here.
I mean,
The NES game, despite being a Konami title, had very cool Mega Man vibes to it. Just instead of switching weapons, you swapped characters that you freed from the previous stages, had some sweet tunes, sick gameplay.
okay, I agree with you on that, but
The arcade game as well,
you know what? It, go off.
it's just so good. It's a 4-player Konami licensed arcade game. It may not be as loved as our heroes on a half shell, but it is still pretty solid. Fantastic gameplay, music and voices from the show. It's just a fun time. It's anthropomorphic comic characters from a little-known publisher that got big via a cartoon and a toy series. It belongs here.
Anyway, where were we? And finally, Number 1. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Shredder's Revenge.
It's on everything.
For longtime fans of Turtles games, this being at number 1 instead of Turtles in Time may come as a bit of a shell shock. Hell, we were pretty close to putting this as number 2 ourselves. But when you look at this game objectively, what more could a TMNT fan possibly ask for? We've got more stages, 6-player co-op, more playable characters, combat that's even better than its arcade predecessors, a soundtrack that features members of Wu-Tang, and Mike freaking Patton doing the opening theme? At some point, you've just got to step back and say, yeah, okay, you've topped Turtles in Time. It's a thing that's possible, and it can be done. And that's okay.
Don't forget Mega Ran, my dude. He's got a solid track on there as well.
The game also features as many foot soldiers, masters, triceratons, roadkill Rodneys, rats, rat kings, and other enemy types as you could possibly ask for. Game be stacked. Plus, the upgrading in this game hits that sweet spot where it's measured strictly by in-game points. No extra currency to pick up, just foot soldier butts to kick until you gain more health, extra special bar, or a new ability. Mix that with how bite-sized each stage is, and maxing out each character becomes something you can just pick up and do for 10-15 minutes at a time if you want. Although putting down the controller can sometimes be a challenge in itself. You can even join online with random parties of people, which is about as close to the arcade co-op experience as you can get from a home console right now. This game pulls out all the stops, has a world of nostalgia and references for longtime TMNT fans, and was clearly made by a team that has a deep love for all things TMNT. The biggest challenge is playing it without having a big stupid smile on your face. And let me tell you, I outright failed that challenge. Hey everyone, thanks for watching and for sticking it out until the end of the video. We hope you enjoyed this list half as much as we enjoyed making it. We will have some more stuff coming. We're already working on brand new lists, a few other surprises. We've got content for Mega Man X, The Simpsons, all sorts of new stuff. Anyways, thanks again, and until next time, stay tuned.